Warning, this episode contains graphic content. Listener discretion is advised.
Hey guys, I'm Amanda.
I'm Milissa, and this is Dark and Twisties.
Dark and Twisties is a weekly crime and creepy podcast hosted by two best friends who uncover some of life's twisted moments.
Bringing you a dark dose of serotonin and self-care sprinkled with a little humor, we run you through the facts all while dropping our unprofessional opinion.
Follow us on Instagram at Dark and Twisties Podcast.
Find us by searching Dark and Twisties on Spotify and Google Podcasts.
And join us as we unravel our latest dark and twisty obsession.
So today we're going to be talking about the Macdonald Murders that happened in 1970 at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Little disclaimer for right now, this is a pretty brutal case. It has to deal with children, and if that's something you don't want to listen to, I'm giving you the opportunity to not listen.
Get out while you can.
Get out now. 3:42 a.m. on February 17th, 1970, emergency dispatchers got a 911 call from Macdonald simply saying, "Help, 544 Castle Drive stabbing. 544 Castle Drive stabbing, hurry." The operator then heard the phone fall to the floor. 10 minutes later, MPs had arrived to the house, initially thinking they were just responding to a domestic disturbance. And when they came up to the front door, they noticed it was closed and locked, and received no response when they knocked, so they decided to go around back. Once they were around back, they found the screen door closed, but the back door was wide open. So a sergeant entered the home and made his way into the master bedroom. When he walked in, he immediately ran outside and yelled for them to get to Womack, or get Womack ASAP. And for those who don't know, Womack is the hospital there on Fort Bragg. Macdonald's wife, Colette, was found on the floor of the master bedroom. She was laying on her back and had been clubbed repeatedly and stabbed 21 times in the chest with an ice pick and 16 times around her neck and chest area with a knife. The cops found Jeffrey laying next to her, face down with his head on Colette's chest and one arm around her neck. He was alive, but also sort of injured. When the MPs approached him, they heard him whisper, "Check my kids. I heard my kids yelling." The MPs went into the girl's room and found 5-year-old Kimberly in her bed, having been repeatedly bludgeoned on her head and body and stabbed in the neck with a knife about 8 to 10 times. Her skull had been fractured due to 2 hits to her head. The wounds were severe enough that they would have caused a major brain injury. Across the hallway, they found 2-year-old Kristen laying in her bed with a baby bottle close to her mouth. She had been stabbed 33 times across the chest, neck, hands, and back with a knife, and 15 times with an ice pick. The injuries to her hands were noted to likely be defense wounds.
Even 2 years old.
That's a baby.
Yeah, just thinking about having to defend yourself at 2.
I can't even think about that.
33 times?
She was 2 years old. Why that many times? I don't understand it. On the headboard of the Macdonald's bed, the word pig was written in blood, which was later determined to be Colette's blood. Macdonald was resuscitated and promptly sat up and said, "Jesus Christ, look at my wife. I'm gonna kill those goddamn acid heads." He was immediately taken to Womack Hospital and was shouting, "Let me see my kids," as he was taken out of the house on the stretcher. Doctors at Womack discovered that Jeffrey's wounds were way less severe than what his wife and children suffered. He had only suffered cuts, bruises, and fingernail scratches to his face and his back, which fingernail scratches means somebody was fighting him. He was also found to have a mild concussion and a single stab wound between 2 ribs on his right torso, which the surgeon at the hospital described as clean, small, and sharp. Little background, Jeffrey was a doctor.
That's a little too coincidental there, homie.
Right. It was a very clean wound. He ended up having a collapsed lung. So Macdonald was questioned by CID, which is the Criminal Investigation Division, which is basically like the detectives for the military. According to him, at 2 a.m. the night of February 17th, he was washing the dishes from dinner that night and decided to go to bed, but his youngest daughter, Kristen, had wet his side of the bed earlier that night, and he didn't want to wake up his wife, so he decided to just fall asleep on the couch. He says he was later awoken by his wife screaming, "Jeff, Jeff, help. Why are they doing this to me?" As he got up off the couch, he claims he was attacked by 3 men, stating one of the men was wearing white surgical gloves. He said he also saw a 4th intruder who was a tall white woman with long blonde hair, possibly a wig, wearing white knee-high boots with a white floppy hat, who was standing nearby holding a lit candle saying, "Acid is groovy, kill the pigs."
He wakes up and he's like, "Damn those acid heads, I'm gonna kill them." Like, that's the first thing you think. And Acid is groovy.
Acid is groovy, you guys.
Oh my god. People are weird.
Very weird. So he also said in the struggle, his pajama top was pulled over his head and he was assaulted until he was knocked unconscious. When he had come to, he stumbled room to room, attempting mouth to mouth on both of his daughters and then his wife. He says he pulled a small knife from Colette's chest and placed it next to her on the floor, attempting to find a pulse, and then draped his pajama jacket over her chest and phoned for help. Within minutes of the MPs arriving at the crime scene, they were instructed to stop all vehicles and look for 2 white men, 1 black man, and a woman wearing a white floppy hat. They failed to find the suspects and the efforts were stopped by 6 a.m. Shortly after it was finally daylight, they found the murder weapons just outside of the back door. These included a kitchen knife, an ice pick, and a 31-inch piece of lumber, all covered in blood. They were all determined to come from Macdonald's house, and all of them had been wiped clean of fingerprints. Macdonald later claimed he had never seen those items before, which makes no sense because the knife they found was determined to be from his kitchen, like it was from a set. And then that piece of lumber was actually determined to come from like the slats under, I think it was Kimberly's bed. Like, you know, when you have like the wooden slats that hold the bed up.
Oh, yeah.
So
That's
that piece of
item.
lumber, yeah, it came from under her bed. I don't think they ever explained whether or not he took it from the bed that night or if it was just not there because it had broken off. Either way, if it was something that was from her bed that he had taken, I don't think intruders would have been like, oh, let me go get that thing from under her bed.
Yeah, like if you're gonna go into somebody's house and kill a whole bunch of people, you kind of have an idea of what you're gonna use. And then if not, like you use normal, like a kitchen knife, that's normal. You know, an ice pick, I guess wherever you live, like that's kind of normal. Grabbing the piece of wood from underneath your bed requires a little bit more effort.
Right.
And they were on acid. I don't think they're like, let's grab this piece of wood and just beat people with it.
Right. So this happened pretty close to when the Manson murders had occurred. The Manson murders happened in August of 1969, and this murder happened February of 1970. So to the investigators, it seemed a little sketch that his account sounded so much like what happened in the Manson murders, the fact that pig was written in blood on their headboard, and that by his account, hippies on drugs broke in and murdered his family. So very quickly, the CID began to not really believe Macdonald's account of the night. Jeff was trained in unarmed combat, but the living room where he says he was attacked and fought for his life showed very few signs of struggle, apart from a coffee table being knocked over with a pile of magazines on the edge and a plant being knocked over. So after questioning Macdonald's neighbors, they all said they didn't hear any signs of a struggle or disturbance during the early hours, but had heard Colette yelling in a very angry tone, which sounds kind of like they were arguing.
Yeah, like they were fighting about something. She's not gonna say in like a mean or like an angry way, like help, what are they doing, or why are they doing this to me? Like that's more of a like scream for help, not angry.
Right, and I don't know if you've been down to Fort Bragg. I have. The houses aren't that far apart. If she was screaming help, I feel like her neighbors would have heard that.
Oh, for sure.
And they didn't hear any of it. They didn't hear commotion at all coming from the house, except for her and Jeff kind of yelling at each other. Doesn't really add up.
Not at all.
So aside from the very little damage in the house, the investigators didn't find any fibers from Jeff's pajama top that he claimed was ripped in the struggle with the intruders, but they did find fibers from his top underneath Colette's body, which is a very weird place for them to be, in both of the girls' bedrooms, and one fiber was under Kristen's fingernails. Now, if you remember back, he had scratches on his face. They also didn't find any blood on either of the phones that Jeff said he used to call for help. They did, however, find the tip of a bloodied surgical glove underneath the headboard where pig was written in blood that matched the type of gloves that were underneath his kitchen sink. Doctor surgical gloves.
Oh, coincidental.
It's so weird. And it had also rained the night of the 16th and the 17th, and Macdonald claimed that the woman's boots were soaking wet and dripping as she walked around the house, but the only footprint they found in the entire house was a bloody bare footprint located in Kristen's bedroom. Those clean hippies with their bare feet.
Those hippies on acid who cleaned my kitchen.
They cleaned my kitchen, they vacuumed my floors.
They didn't take anything, but they seem to have left a few things. Like he's doing a terrible job at trying to make himself not sound like the person who did it.
Right, very. Because it just, what he's saying happened, it doesn't make sense with anything that was found at the crime scene at all. So, by mid-March, the CID had obtained the forensic results from inside the house that contradicted Macdonald's accounts of what had happened that night. So, for example, Kimberly's blood was found on his pajama top even though he stated he was not wearing it when he tried to resuscitate her. And his blood was only found in 2 places in the house. One was in front of the kitchen cabinet, which contained the surgical gloves, and the other was on the right side of the hallway bathroom sink. He says he was assaulted in the living room. None of his blood was there. He says he went and tried to resuscitate all of his kids, and his blood was not found there either. So if you were stabbed, you would have been
all over the place.
Right, so it makes no sense that his blood was in 2 places and that was it. Investigators were also a little sketched out as to why Colette's blood was also found in Kristen's room, even though they were all found in different rooms, suggesting they were all attacked separately. Blood evidence also suggested that Kimberly was initially attacked as she entered the master bedroom, and so the investigators wondered why attackers would bring her back to her room to continue the attack there. If you're a hippie on drugs, like he says, you wouldn't pick up a child that you had just basically murdered and carry them back to their bedroom. I mean, you wouldn't even know which bedroom was hers. You wouldn't know, oh, she came from that bedroom. You wouldn't know that. So it didn't make sense to them. And also, all 4 members of the Macdonald family had different blood types. So it was super easy to determine whose blood was where. So they were able to tell, like, oh, this is Kristen's blood, or oh, this is Kimberly's blood, or oh, this is Colette's blood. They knew whose blood was where.
That's nifty.
So the CID ended up coming up with their own idea of what happened according to the evidence they got from inside the house. And this is literally evidence they pulled of where blood was. So they speculated that Jeff and Colette got into an argument about something, and Colette threw a brush at his head because I guess Jeff had a mark on his forehead that didn't break the skin, but it was a mark. They think that she threw something at him, and they think that he got so mad that he retaliated and started to hit her, at first just with like his fist, and then he started to hit her with the big piece of lumber that came from under the girl's bed. They think Kimberly woke up because she heard the commotion, walked into the bedroom, and was accidentally struck on the head with the piece of lumber, so they think that he was swinging it back to hit Colette again and hit Kimberly. They say that Macdonald, since he was a doctor, he saw the wound on Kimberly's head and freaked out because he knew that was a fatal blow. She was going to end up dying from that. By that point, Jeff had knocked Colette unconscious, so he thought he had already killed her. So they think that he picked Kimberly up off the floor, carried her back to her bedroom, and fatally stabbed her. And then he walked over to Kristen's room, planning to kill her because she would have been the last remaining witness, even though I think she was sleeping. But Colette had regained consciousness again and went into Kristen's room and threw herself over Kristen to try to protect her, which is why the investigators think that her blood was in Kristen's room. They say that after he killed them both, he wrapped Colette back up in a sheet and carried her back to the master bedroom. So CID investigators then theorized he tried to cover up the murders by using details from the Manson murders he found in a magazine they had on the living room coffee table. So those magazines that were knocked over, there was a magazine there that had an article about the Manson murders. They think that he got the idea from that. They say he put on the surgical gloves from the kitchen, went back into the bedroom and used Colette's blood to write pig on the headboard. He then laid his pajama top on top of Colette and stabbed her multiple times with the ice pick. They said he went into the bathroom and very carefully inflicted wounds on himself, disposed of their surgical gloves, threw the weapons outside the back door, called 911 for help, and then went and laid next to Colette and, in quotations, passed out. Because they aren't 100% sure he was actually unconscious when they got there. They feel like he may have been faking until they walked in.
Well, yeah, he popped right back up and was like, them damn hippies. Like, what?
Right, because he basically, what happened was, is as soon as the MPs walked in, they heard him whispering something. So it was like he was unconscious, but then as soon as he heard people walk in, he was fine and was whispering. It doesn't make sense at all.
Lion ass
Son of a bitch. On April 6, 1970, 2 months later, offers formally interrogated Macdonald. So he was first offered to recount his version of events that night, but he didn't. And investigators they didn't believe him at all. Midway through questioning, they were talking about his stab wound, and investigators asked, "You didn't do this to yourself, did you?" And Macdonald openly denied the accusation and also said that he basically had to force the ER doctors to give him a chest tube because he was sure he had a punctured lung. Tell me that doesn't sound sketch.
Yeah.
He just knew it.
I'm sorry. sorry. I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know if I had a punctured lung. I'd just be like, help. Of course. He's like, I'm sure I have a punctured lung. Like, of course you are. Because you did it yourself, homie.
Right. So, and then they also wanted to know how 4 people could have broken into such a small home and not damaged any property or make a huge mess. Macdonald had no good reason for this. He couldn't give an explanation as to why they wouldn't have made a bigger mess murdering 3 people. Forensic evidence that went against his accounts of his movements in the house and what happened, he couldn't give a good reason for that. And they also asked him to submit to a polygraph test, and he agreed, but within 10 minutes, he changed his mind and wouldn't do it. So he originally was like, oh yeah, sure, I'll do it. And then 10 minutes later, he said, nope, don't want to do it.
In that situation, like, if you really didn't kill your whole entire family, if, you know, it really was just looking super coincidental that it was you, like, you'd think you would do anything possible to be like, all right, cool. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to pass this because I didn't do it. Like, you're saying I'm lying? Well, this is the way we're going to test it.
He wouldn't do it. Like, he's still, I don't think he ever did it. Or if he did, it wasn't submitted for evidence. So either way, he didn't do it. On the evening of April 6th, Macdonald was relieved of his duties and placed under restriction pending further investigation. The following day, he was assigned an Army lawyer, but at the pleading of his mother on April 10th, he hired and this is a quote, flamboyant civilian defense attorney named Bernard Siegel. And then less than a month later, on May 1st, he was formally charged with 3 counts of murder. Murder.
Like, why does it matter if it's a flamboyant civilian defense attorney?
I don't know, but like, I'm telling you, it was a quote that his mother pleaded with him to hire this flamboyant civilian defense attorney. None of what he says makes sense with like the blood evidence that they ended up finding.
Yeah, there's no way that a whole bunch of people go into a house and murder all these people, and there's not traces of blood all over the place, dripping back and forth, shoe prints, fingerprints all over the place, other things being touched, because it's not like they went in and cased the place, you know what I mean? If they're taking pieces off the bottom of the bed, they clearly don't know what they're doing. So, like, that's pretty damn clean for some people who are just like, hey, let me go get the piece of wood underneath this kid's bed and just call it a day.
It doesn't, especially because, you know, all 3 of them were found in different rooms. They ended up finding, like I said, they found Colette's blood in Kristen's room, which wouldn't make sense because she was found in her bedroom. And it's the same story with why they found, like, Kimberly's blood in the master bedroom, and then he's trying to say that it was hippies that did it. They wouldn't have picked her up and brought her to a different room to kill her, just like they wouldn't have taken Colette from a different room.
And I've never heard of anybody who goes in and kills a whole family and is like, let's play musical bodies.
And that's, you know, one of the other things that gets me is that he says it was hippies and, like, this drug-induced thing, but they barely hurt him.
Yeah. Like, they beat the crap out of him in the living room, apparently. There was this huge struggle, but he only got, you know, popped one time. But his family's over here suffering, like, multiple wounds.
Right, and you would think you would hurt the person who's fighting back more than you would a child who's barely fighting you back. And they said the same thing about it, was that if you had these 4 people that came in and you were in this living room fighting for your life, how come only a coffee table got knocked over?
I would be grabbing the piece of wood underneath the bed, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
That'd be me. I'd be like, hold up, I know where there's another piece of something I can get you with.
And, like, he was in the military, and pretty much anyone in the military is trained in, like, hand-to-hand combat. But it's like he basically didn't fight them off. Like, he just didn't even fight them off, but then he's acting like he did. And I'm just like, no, bro.
No, bro.
That don't make no sense.
And the fact that her blood, Kimberly's blood, was found on his pajama top, even though he technically wasn't wearing it when he tried to resuscitate. And she had fibers underneath her fingernails of that exact shirt. 1
fiber from his pajama top that he was wearing that night. So it's like she grabbed onto it and just 1 little fiber pulled off, but it was underneath her fingernail. So it wasn't just like laying next to her, it was under her fingernail.
There's no way.
Like I said, the things that don't make sense is that when he went to the hospital, he had scratches on his face. One of the little girls, or Colette, had skin under her nail, and it was his skin. I want to say that magazine that had like the article about the Manson murders, they found blood on that page. Like somebody had opened that page to look at it specifically.
Yeah, somebody who just gotten done accidentally killing their wife and had to kill their kid and was like, we need to blame it on somebody. Oh yeah, there was that dude a couple months ago who killed a whole bunch of people, so let's blame it on him.
Right, and I think that's why they found it so sketchy, is that the Manson murders had happened so close to this. It was like less than 6 months before.
Yeah, it wasn't that long before that happened.
I don't know. And like I said, it's just such a brutal case that it's hard to believe that a father could do that to their own child. Colette was 4 months pregnant when this happened as well.
Why does all this weird shit happen in the 70s? Like, I swear police officers in the 70s did not know how to do anything. They just basically picked people off the streets and was like, hey, you want to go to the police academy?
Right, because like none of them were competent back then.
Yeah, like I got my driver's license at the Utopia at Disneyland. That doesn't mean that I know how to drive a car. You, sir, got your police academy certification in probably a cereal box, but that doesn't make you a cop.
Right. It gets brought up that like when the MPs came into the house, they were basically just trampling through the house and ruining any sort of evidence that would have been there.
Oh, I swear, people in the 70s never knew how to conceal a crime scene. It was like, somebody died right there, let me just go walk right through them. Oh, fingerprints? Right. We don't need those. Let me go ahead and cover those up. Like, what the hell?
Yeah, because like I'm pretty sure it's brought up later by like his attorney that there's no way that they could say that it was him because all of the evidence was destroyed because of the MPs and like the forensic people just walking in and not giving a shit. When he called the police, you know, he said stabbing. It took the police 10 minutes to get there, and they were in no rush, and they thought they were just coming for a domestic, even though when he called, he said, oh, stabbing. He said it twice, and they still thought they were just coming for a domestic dispute, and that was it. And that makes no sense to me. How can you hear somebody on the phone say stabbing and be like, oh, it was just a fight?
Yeah, how do you hear a stabbing and think, oh yeah, it's just a husband and a wife fighting?
Right. Like, I don't understand how that comes over the line twice and you call the cops to the house and you're like, oh, it's just a domestic dispute. Like, no.
Yeah, don't worry.
No, it's not.
No big deal.
Because, like I said, it took them 10 minutes to get there. And like I said, I don't think it would have mattered because I think they were already dead anyway.
Yeah, probably. Well, especially since the little one, that blow to her head was gonna basically cause brain damage, and she wasn't gonna have much of a life after that anyways.
She would have died within, like, a couple of hours. Like, that would have killed her within a couple of hours. And I think that's why the cops think that he ended up killing both of the kids, too, because after that happened, he felt like, oh, shit, she's gonna die anyway. So investigators ended up speculating was that's why he had to kill both. Well, didn't have to kill both of them, but did kill both of them.
And, like, the fact that he tries to say, like, all this movement happened, like these bodies being moved back and forth and stuff, but, like, the blood, all your blood, it was all different types, homie, like... It doesn't show that at all. So you can't, they were so precise on picking up everybody and cleaned up every single inch of blood. Like, not the same people who had to go and pick a freaking piece of lumber out from under a little girl's bed or wherever it was, like, had to pull actual stuff from the house.
Right. And, like, I think the weirdest part about it is the fact that his blood was, like, nowhere. His blood was in 2 spots, and one was right there where the gloves were, and then the second one was in the bathroom, like on one side of the sink. And so later on in like the investigation, he ends up saying like, oh, I think because of my surgical background, before I tried to like resuscitate my wife or whatever, I went and washed my hands. What? No, sir, you wouldn't wash your hands.
No, he didn't.
That's exactly what he says, is he says, oh, I think with my surgical background, I went and washed my hands before I tried to, like, check their wounds. Or I think he said before he went to check his wounds, he washed his hands.
We're not worried about infection right now, sir. We're actually just making sure that you don't die.
Right.
The infection can be dealt with later. The life is kind of what we're worried about at this point. Let me go wash my hands.
It's just so, and he says, oh, I washed him. I think he said he washed his hands before checking his wounds. He was super worried about himself. he wasn't worried about anyone else, but he was worried about his wounds. He's like, oh, I gotta wash my hands.
Yeah, let me go wash my hands before I touch my own wounds. Because, you know, after all this, the last thing I need is an infection.
Right? I don't need an infection in my precisely cut wound here. No infections today.
I put a lot of effort into stabbing myself. I do not want an infection.
It already hurt. I don't need more pain.
Yeah, no more pain, please. Yeah, none of that even makes any sense.
Not at all. And I think one of the weirdest things to me with this case was that it took them months to even, like, investigate him.
It's because of a collapsed lung.
Oh, his poor collapsed lung.
His poor collapsed lung.
I'm pretty sure that he was, like, released that same day from the hospital. Because he had, like, teeny tiny little injuries, and I think they just let him go. But that's one of the things that I think got me about this case was how long it took them to investigate him. Like, you gave him way too long to get his story straight in his head.
I love the fact that he says he got up off the couch and he was attacked by those 3 men. And so, like, he makes it seem like it was very instant. Like, as soon as he got up, it was like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. But he was literally able to precisely explain so much information about them, like what they look like. I'm gonna tell you right now, I have no idea what my child is even wearing right now, let alone somebody who's coming into my house and, like, attacking me. But if they attacked you that fast, you had time to see that she was wearing possibly a wig, the color of her knee-high boots, the fact that she was holding a candle, and you were able to, like, articulate the fact that she said, acid is groovy, kill the pigs.
He says that Colette screaming is what woke him up. As soon as he got up off the couch, he was attacked. So how was Colette screaming for her life, but those same people that you say attacked her were in the living room attacking you?
These are teleporting killers. Teleporting killers.
Because he says he was woken up by her screaming, and as soon as he heard her screaming, he jumped up off the couch to go help.
And was attacked by 3 men and a woman wearing the hat. Yeah, homie, you can't even get your story straight. These are teleporting killers in his defense.
Because how the hell would they even have known that he woke up at that exact moment? How would they have known that? They were in the master bedroom.
Or they just passed by him coming into the house and thought to themselves, you know what, we'll just leave the one closest to the front door alone and we'll go start upstairs. Like, that's not how anybody operates. You start with the beginning and then you go to the end. You cut off the exit. You don't leave somebody right next to the exit, let alone a man. Like, you don't leave the man of the house alone. Like, that would have been anybody who really wanted to go in there and kill these people. That would have been their first person to get rid of. The one who's got the strength behind him, the one that's closest to the door, that's going to be him. They're not going to just pass by him, go stab the wife a few times, let her scream, and then go all the way downstairs and then go and beat you up.
Right, and I just found a blueprint of their house. The master bedroom was all the way over here, and he says he was asleep on the couch here. Tell me how they got from this bedroom all the way to where he is in a split second as soon as he woke up.
Teleporting. Dude, those are some fast killers.
There's like an entire hallway. He says the woman was standing right here at the end of this hallway, like right where the living room opens up into that hallway. So they ran around her, came for you as soon as you got up off the couch.
Yeah. There's no way.
No way. This blueprint also shows you, like, where blood was found, and it tells you down the bottom whose blood is whose.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but like a doctor knows that if there is a weapon or some type of item inside of a wound that's bleeding, you don't take it out. And didn't he take the knife out of her chest and placed it on the floor?
And this is the other thing. The knife that he found in her chest was a different knife than the one that was, like, thrown outside that was used in the murders.
This guy's an idiot.
Right, and so the one that he says he pulled out of her chest was a completely different knife that was not used for any of the rest of the murders, none of the stabbings, nothing.
Oh my god.
And that it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, no, it's not how things work.
Not at all. And like I said, if you look at like this little blueprint thing, you can see like this top bedroom over here was Kristen's, I think. Or was that Kimberly's? Kristen. It had to have been Kristen, yeah, because there's O blood. But if you look at it, they found A blood all over Kristen's bed. And Colette was killed here. Colette also has A. So if you look at this document too, it's showing A blood leading into the bathroom where Jeffrey's blood was also found.
For someone who's so smart that, was a doctor and was in the military, he was quite stupid.
Right, very. So in the living room, there's even a thing here that says A or AB was found next to the knocked over coffee table. A is Colette and AB is Kimberly. So how were there blood out there?
Yeah, why was there blood out there? Unless that's where it all started. Hence why there isn't that much of a struggle in that living room.
And there's also some over by the kitchen.
Yep.
The investigators said was that if there was that big of a struggle, it wouldn't have just been that coffee table and like a plant knocked over.
Yeah, no. 3 people and then another person. One person's trying to fight off 3 people. So you figure how much space 3 people is going to take just to stand there. Like, what are they doing? Standing around the coffee table? Like, don't come around here. I'm going to get you. Like, no.
Right. And if he was asleep on the couch, if he would have had like the couch and then the coffee table in between, he would have been in between the couch and the coffee table. So if he was fighting them off, he would have had to have come out from around the coffee table. And there's no evidence to show that. And like none of his blood was found out there.
Yeah, I wonder if he got mad because the little girl peed the bed,
That was one of the theories, was that they were fighting about like her constantly peeing on his side of the bed and all this other stuff. And so they got into a fight and, just out of reaction, she threw something at him. And then that sent him over the edge.
Yeah, and that was kind of it. He was already mad about the pee on the bed. So it's like, okay, well, now I'm in full gear.
It's also said that during his interview about what happened, he didn't really have very many emotions about it. Like, typically your whole family gets killed. You're going to talk about it. You're going to be sad. He apparently had no emotion, and he was very, very quick to turn on the tears, but then very, very quick to turn them off.
Yeah, like they were pretty much like had an on and off switch. It wasn't by the fact that you were emotionally scarred by this whole situation that happened. It's just that you're like, oh, time to cue the waterworks.
Right, because they said that he was very quick to cry. Like, he would be talking about it and he would have no emotion, and then he would look around the room and kind of notice people were looking at him weird. So he would very quickly turn the tears on. And then as soon as he was done talking about it, he would very, very quickly just turn them off and be like, okay, what's next?
Yeah, like I did my part now. What's the next question so I can get through this one?
And he would talk about it and be totally fine. And I guess one of the investigators said that he looked up at one point and noticed that one of the investigators was kind of looking at him funny. And as soon as he realized that, he was like, oh, I'm crying now.
Like somebody talking about that would have cried the entire time.
Right, you can't just turn your emotions on and be like, oh my god, I'm so sad, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, I'm not sad anymore.
Recalling events like that, especially if you really didn't do it, if all what he said really happened, that's super traumatic. You're not just gonna sit there and be like, well, this is how this happened. Here's my story of it. I would be bawling my eyes out the entire time. They'd be like, can you repeat that? I'd be like, let me clear the snot out of my nose first. Let me try and give you an idea of what happened. But no, It's just like, well, this is what happened, but cue the fireworks. Boo-hoo me. I got stabbed in the throat or in the chest or wherever he got stabbed.
He says that he went to both of his kids' rooms to try to resuscitate them, and it didn't work. But then when the dispatchers got there, he said, go check on my kids. I heard them yelling.
Yeah.
If you tried to resuscitate them and you weren't able to, you knew they were dead.
Yeah, you knew that they were dead at that point. Why would you leave? If you weren't able to resuscitate them, then you leave. If you were, you would have passed out in that room with one of them trying to get them back to life. But no, you just left your kids and went to your wife? No, homie, you're a liar.
Yeah, and when he was investigated, he said he went room to room trying to resuscitate his kids, and then he went to his wife and tried to resuscitate her, but he couldn't, because when he was trying to give her mouth to mouth, she had air coming out of her chest. So if you went into both of your kids' rooms trying to resuscitate them. You knew they were gone. Why was one of the first things you said, check on my kids? I heard them yelling. Like, you knew they were gone if you went in there.
Yeah.
Because for a hot minute, I was like, oh, you know, maybe it wasn't him. But now I'm like, oh, sir.
Oh, sir. We need to talk about this one.
Some of what you're saying doesn't make sense, my guy.
Yeah, that's like all of it.
None of it. None of it makes sense, Jeffrey.
Dear Jeffrey, you're a liar. Love me.
Also, rot in hell.
Rot in hell. Hold on, wait, whose bloody footprint is... Well, I'm looking at crime scene photos right now. I have been this whole time, but whose bloody footprint is that?
Think they thought it was Jeffrey's because they think it was his from when he... And it was coming out of Kimberly's room. I think maybe it was when they think that he either moved Kimberly back into her bed after he hit her in the master bedroom, or it was after he put her back in the bed, because it's just one single bloody footprint. I think it's leading out of her room, not into it. I think it's leading out.
Yeah, it's coming out of the bedroom. Yeah.
And it was Kimberly's blood.
Oh.
So I think that's what they thought it was, that after he brought her back in the room, she was bleeding, because obviously she got hit on the head really fucking hard. And so I think they thought that her blood got on him, and as he was walking back into either Colette, their room, or over into Kristen's room, he stepped in blood. I saw the photos of, like, the girls in Colette. I don't think I ever saw that one.
Yeah, it's like interior... Yeah, it's interior 2, and it's the first, like, 4 pictures. And they don't show any of the pictures of him. Like... So they each all have, like, their own section. None of these pictures are from any of what he, like, endured during all that.
He barely endured anything. Like, nothing really happened to him.
Yeah, there's no pictures of him like that.
I think that's honestly just because nothing really happened to him. I don't even think they had much to document about him because, like I said, he was almost instantly awake as soon as people were in the house. So, like, I don't even think that they have any pictures of, like, how they found him next to Colette. It's just that's how they recall they found him. Why am I looking at these pictures?
Yeah, these are so sad. I was just looking at the crime scene because there's, like, pictures of, like, the different areas where there's just shit all over the place.
Right. See? Just like that. This picture, that's all that happened in that big old scuffle, was that table got knocked over. That's it.
Yeah, but 3 men apparently attacked you. Okay.
It didn't even look like somebody broke into the house. There was no signs of, like, forced entry. There was no signs of, like, people walking into the house with wet boots, which it was raining that night.
The first interior all the way at the bottom, it's a picture of the phone off the hook, which the phone has, like, no blood all over it. If you just got done calling and saying stabbing after resuscitating 2 of your kids and your wife.
If you just got stabbed and you just tried resuscitating all of your family members, you would have had all of their blood on you.
Yeah, there was blood all over the place. There was all over the beds, all over, even on, like, her pajama bottoms, on Colette's bottoms. There's blood everywhere. But nothing on nothing on the phone.
Nope, there was nothing on the phone. And then that knife that's right there on the floor, that's the one that they say he pulled out of her chest. But that was literally not used in the murder.
Any doctor knows. I'm not even a doctor, and I know that if someone's bleeding or has something inside of their body, you do not take it out.
No, you leave it in.
Yeah, you take it out, you risk anything that it's holding in place being undone and blood going everywhere. And if it's an artery, guess what? They're dead.
Yeah.
Like, common sense tells you that. But he's a doctor.
Exactly. But he's a doctor, and he just was like, oh, that's okay, I'll take it out.
I'm a doctor. His whole pajama top is soaked in blood, but he didn't get any blood anywhere else.
No, he's just, you know. Like I said he was stabbed in the living room, but his blood was found absolutely nowhere in the living room.
He a damn liar. Cats and Crimes is a monthly true crime blog started by 2 cousins who decided that their passion of digging deeper into unsolved crimes and missing persons was better shared with others. Covering cold cases, missing persons, active investigations, and causes of death that can't be explained, they help bring awareness to these sometimes forgotten crimes. You can check them out at www.catsandcrime.net or on Facebook and Instagram at catsandcrime. On the evening of September 27, 2004, Maggie Zingman spoke with her 18-year-old daughter Brittany Phillips before heading to bed, something that the mother-daughter duo did often. As several days pass, Maggie and Brittany's classmates are unable to get a hold of her. Brittany would then be discovered just 3 days later, murdered in her own apartment. To find out more about Brittany's tragic story and the journey to catching her killer, head over to catsandcrime.net/Brittany Phillips.
So, since this case is such a crazy case, we are going to end up doing 2 parts. The next part should be next week. We will talk about the trials. So make sure to check back in next week for part 2 of the Macdonald murders. As always, don't forget to find us on Spotify and Google Podcasts by searching Dark and Twisties.
And follow us on Instagram at Dark and Twisties Podcast.
Bye!
Bye!